She planned the perfect wedding. I uncovered the perfect lie. Behind the flowers and guest lists was a truth no one wanted to admit. Her family was going broke for a day she refused to scale down. I said no. What followed was betrayal, silence, and the start of freedom. My fiancée Ree, 26F, and I, 29M, had been together for just over 2.5 years when I proposed 4 months ago. She was a kindergarten teacher, always full of warmth and compassion, someone who remembered birthdays, volunteered at animal shelters, and never failed to call her parents twice a week. I'm a software developer, not exactly the most expressive person, but with her, life felt fuller. Her parents, Margaret, 58F, and Tom, 60M, adored her. Tom had worked in construction for decades, while Margaret had recently retired from her role as a dental office secretary. They lived modestly, in a cozy 3-bedroom house they'd bought in the mid-90s. Ree often spoke with deep respect and affection about how hard they worked to give her a good life. They even paid for her university education by taking out a second mortgage on that house. When I decided to propose, I went all in. I planned the moment for months, settling on the botanical garden where we had our 3rd date. I got her parents' blessing and bought a ring that cost me 2 months' salary. She said yes through tears. The following weekend, her parents hosted a small engagement party. It was humble, sweet, and full of genuine joy. But the very next day, Ree showed up at our flat with 3 bridal magazines, a color-coded notebook, and a determination that caught me off guard. She'd already earmarked several luxury venues, $8,000 dresses, and cake options that served twice as many people as we had on our guest list. I assumed she'd been saving like I had, roughly $30,000, but when I gently mentioned it, her face dropped. She looked at me like I'd just suggested we elope at a roadside diner. "My parents will pay for everything," she said. "They've always promised me that." That set off alarms in my head. Just weeks earlier, Ree had told me her parents were behind on their mortgage, with Tom only managing part-time handyman work after being laid off. Margaret's retirement income wasn't much either. I tried to propose alternatives, a smaller wedding, a tighter budget. Ree pushed back hard. She said I didn't understand how important this day was to her, and that her parents were thrilled to make it happen. But then, in a chance run-in at the local grocer, Tom looked tired. He confided that they were considering refinancing their house again to fund the wedding. The pride in his voice had faded. That was when I started to pay closer attention. I couldn't shake the discomfort. Every time Ree gushed about floral arrangements or designer lace, my mind wandered to Tom's worn-out face at the grocery store. He looked like a man barely holding it together. Ree was deep in wedding mode, booking fittings, placing deposits, sending save-the-date cards like party favors. Our apartment turned into a war zone of brochures, contracts, and calligraphy samples. The little notebook had ballooned into a binder stuffed with tabs and receipts. I kept quiet. I didn't want to dampen her excitement. At least, not without knowing the full picture. But something felt off. I needed clarity, so I reached out to Margaret, her mother. We met for coffee, while Ree was out dress shopping. I approached carefully, asking if everything was truly all right with the wedding costs. Margaret stirred her tea, then sighed. "We're making it work," she said, forcing a smile. "She's our only daughter. We want her day to be perfect." "But the mortgage," I said gently. Her smile faltered. "We refinanced. Again. We'll manage." The way she said it, it wasn't confidence, it was resignation. That moment hit me hard. They were sinking into debt. Not for something life-changing like education or a home. For one single day. That evening, I tried to talk to Ree. I told her I admired her parents' devotion, but I couldn't support them putting their future on the line for our wedding. She stiffened. "You're making this about money?" She snapped. "This is supposed to be the happiest time of our lives." "It's not about money," I said. "It's about responsibility. It's about starting our life on solid ground, not fantasy. I don't want your parents suffering while we play make-believe." She stormed out without replying. The next day, she was distant. Then came silence. A week passed. No updates, no vendor meetings. She slept with her back to me. Eventually, I asked if we could delay the wedding. Just a few months. Enough time to come up with a realistic plan. She looked at me coldly. "If you can't handle this wedding," she said, "how will you handle a marriage?" And just like that, the silence between us became more deafening than any fight we'd ever had. 2 days later, I got a call from Tom. His voice was thin, a little shaky, and he asked if we could meet in person. We met at a local park, the same one where Ree used to play as a child, he reminded me, as we sat on a weathered bench. "I know you love my daughter," he said, after a long pause, "but I also know she's determined. Once she locks into something, it's hard to steer her another way." I didn't speak. I just listened. He continued. "I told her we couldn't afford the venue. Not really. Margaret and we've already borrowed against the house more than once. But she insisted. Said you promised. Said it would humiliate her to change plans now. She thinks this wedding is a symbol of how much I love her," I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But if love comes with a price tag, then what are we building here?" Tom nodded slowly. "Son, you're not wrong, but I think she's scared. Of appearing less, of being judged. She's always had that pressure." I left that conversation feeling more conflicted than ever. Tom wasn't blaming me. If anything, he seemed relieved someone else saw what was happening. But it didn't change the facts. Ree wasn't willing to budge, and her parents were too afraid to say no. The tipping point came when I saw an email on our shared iPad. Ree had forwarded a final invoice from a luxury decorator. It was nearly $10,000. And in her reply, she'd written, "Please bill to my parents' address. They're covering this as a final gift. No conversation, no consultation, just quiet assumption." I confronted her that evening. I asked how she could keep spending behind their backs. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "They offered," she said, brushing it off. "No," I said. "They feel trapped. There's a difference." Her expression didn't change. She stood up, collected her things, and said, "If you're going to keep questioning my family and this wedding, maybe you're not the man I thought you were." That night, she left to stay with her parents. I didn't chase her. I spent the next few days in silence, cleaning up the remnants of wedding prep around the apartment. The binder, the dress sketches, the tasting menu notes. All of it felt like evidence of something that had gone wildly off track. Then, one night, I got a text from Margaret. "Thank you for standing up for us. I'm sorry things got this far." And that was when I knew. Ree didn't come back. At first, I thought it might just be a few days. Time for both of us to cool off, reflect, and talk things through like adults. But as the weeks stretched on with no calls, no texts, and no explanation, I started to accept what I already knew deep down. She wasn't planning to fix this. She was waiting for me to give in, but I didn't. One evening, Tom called, quietly, cautiously. "She's still holding on to the idea of the wedding," he said. "Wants us to take out another loan." I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was sad, tragic really. They were willing to bankrupt themselves because their daughter couldn't cope with the idea of scaling back a party. I told Tom the truth, that I loved Ree, but I couldn't marry someone who valued appearances more than honesty, that I wasn't going to be part of something that sacrificed her parents' security just to impress a room full of people we barely knew. He didn't argue, just sighed. A week later, Margaret sent me a message. It was simple, just a photo of their mortgage statement and the balance they still owed. Beneath it, a text. "We're pulling the plug. Thank you." I didn't reply, not immediately. I just stared at it, realizing how close I'd come to being part of a life built on guilt and manipulation. A few days later, I met with a therapist. For the first time in my life, I needed to talk to someone objective. I explained everything, the pressure, the emotional blackmail, the confusion, and slowly, piece by piece, I started to untangle the guilt I'd been carrying. Meanwhile, Ree went public. She posted a long message on social media, painting herself as the abandoned bride, the heartbroken victim of a cold-footed fiancé who didn't believe in family. Photos of her in bridal gowns, hashtags like #canceled wedding and #heartbroken. Comments flooded in with sympathy and outrage. But what she didn't expect were the replies from people who knew the full story, a few relatives, even a friend from college. They gently pointed out inconsistencies, reminding her, publicly, that there was more to the narrative than she let on. She deleted the post within a day. I never responded. Not once, and I didn't need to. The people who mattered knew the truth. One evening, a package arrived at my door. No note. Inside was the engagement ring. I stared at it for a long time, then quietly put it away in the back of a drawer. Not out of anger, but out of finality. That chapter had ended. I'd lost a partner, yes, but I'd also reclaimed my boundaries, and maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something better. In the months that followed, the silence between Ree and me became permanent. No more phone calls, no late-night texts, no mutual friends trying to play mediator, just stillness and peace. I moved out of our shared apartment and into a smaller place closer to my office. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No bridal magazines on the table, no color swatches taped to the walls, just quiet mornings, fresh coffee, and space to breathe. Ree's parents sent one final message, an email, just a few lines long. "We respect your decision. Thank you for trying. We wish you peace." I didn't respond, not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I wanted to finally let everything go. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of being the reasonable one in a story that was never mine to control. Word spread eventually. Friends who'd RSVP'd to the wedding reached out, offering everything from support to confusion. I kept my answers brief. It wasn't right. That was all I said, and most understood. One of the unexpected gifts from the fallout was rediscovering people I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins, college roommates, even an old neighbor who had heard through the grapevine and reached out. These weren't just pity conversations. They were real, grounded. We talked about life, mistakes, and boundaries. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing. I was connecting. Therapy helped too. What started as crisis management became genuine growth. I dug into my need to fix things, to be the calm in everyone else's storm. Turns out, I'd spent years trying to earn love by being useful. That pattern ended the day I walked away from that wedding. One afternoon, I ran into Tom at a bookstore. We locked eyes briefly. He gave me a small, tired smile, and I returned it. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. As for Ree, I heard she eventually moved out of her parents' house and started over somewhere else. She kept her distance, and I respected that. Some things don't need a full circle ending. Some just end. Today, I'm in a healthier relationship. We talk about everything. Fears, finances, the things that scare us. There's no fantasy to maintain, no illusion of perfection. Just two people building something honest, slowly, carefully. Every now and then, someone will ask if I regret walking away from that wedding. My answer never changes. No. I regret not walking away sooner. Because in the end, I didn't lose love. I found self-respect, and that, I've learned, is worth everything. Thank you for following this story. If you'd like more real-life family drama like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one. Looking back, there is no doubt that calling off the wedding was the best decision of my life. What hurt me most was not only the end of a relationship with a woman I had loved deeply, but also watching her parents, two kind, devoted people, become consumed by the financial stress their daughter had put me through. What shocked me most was how Ree had turned a dream into a nightmare, not just for me but for her family as well. The truth is, no wedding, no matter how grand, is worth the security of your parents in their old age or the respect of your relationship. Marriage is not a show. It is a commitment based on respect, commitment, and responsibility. When those elements are gone, there is nothing left to hold on to but the shiny facade of flowers and a veil. I no longer felt anger, only regret. Regret that a once kind person had chosen to be selfish. Regret that family values had been sacrificed for fame, glamour, and the so-called big day. I walked away with a sense of relief, knowing that I had stood for what was right when everything around me had fallen apart. And now I could start again, with peace and without regret.